I sat in the kitchen, listening to the soft whisper of the wind outside the window. The night enveloped our home, but instead of warmth and comfort, I felt only the cold that penetrated deep inside. Tom hadn't come home yet, and that worried me. Recently, he has become different, distant, alienated. Something had changed, and I couldn't figure out what exactly. Our love, once so bright and intoxicating, now seemed like a dark shadow, a reflection of the past. When we met, I thought it would be forever. Tom was everything for me, support, friend, lover, but something began to crack at the seams, and I did not know how to fix it. The phone rang suddenly, and I shuddered in surprise. After answering, I heard his voice, so familiar but somehow alien. "Alice, I'll be late at work," he said. His tone was dry, as if it was an ordinary call that should not be taken seriously. "Tom, are you okay?" I asked, trying not to show excitement. "Yes, just a lot of work. Don't wait for me, go to bed." He quickly ended the conversation, and I was left with the phone in my hand, feeling my heart tighten with anxiety. Something was wrong. I felt it with every cell in my body. But what exactly? And will I be able to overcome what lies ahead? That night I could not sleep. She was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock that counted down the time in silence. Each of his blows reverberated through my mind, as if reminding me of something I was trying to push out of my mind. Tom returned home well past midnight. I heard him quietly open the front door, trying not to wake me up. His steps on the stairs were careful, as if he were stealthily making his way to our bedroom. He thought I was asleep, so he slowly, almost silently, opened the door to the room and began to undress. I closed my eyes, pretending to be asleep, but my heart was pounding so hard that it seemed he must have heard it. Tom got into bed next to me, but instead of hugging me like he used to, he just turned his back to the wall. I felt tears come to my eyes, but I didn't let them burst. What happened to us? Why has everything changed so much? We used to be inseparable, sharing every moment together, but now it's like a wall has grown between us, invisible, but so tangible. In the morning, Tom behaved as if nothing had happened. He went to work, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I was sitting in the kitchen, looking at the empty cup of coffee in front of me, and for the first time I felt that something was being hidden from me. But what exactly? And most importantly, why? My head was full of doubts. I had never allowed myself to suspect Tom before, but now things were different. His behavior, sudden delays at work, coldness in the relationship, these were all signals that I could not ignore. I decided I had to find out the truth, even if it destroyed everything we had. That day I called his office. They said that Tom left early. My suspicion turned into something more, the confidence that he was hiding something important from me. But what exactly? I felt my heart clench in pain. Maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe I made up this drama for myself, but I couldn't trust him like I used to. Something had changed, and this something was tearing me apart from the inside. Now I had to learn the truth, no matter how terrible it was. The next few days I lived on the edge. My thoughts were consumed with suspicion, and Tom's every movement seemed suspicious to me. His indifference and constant refusals reinforced my fears. I could not get rid of the feeling that a third person had appeared between us. One evening, when he again said that he would be late at work, I decided to test his words. It was a difficult decision. I felt guilty, as if I was violating some invisible boundary. But the pain of the unknown was unbearable. I had to know the truth. After Tom left, I decided to follow him. My heart pounded in my chest as I got into the car and followed him at a safe distance. He drove through town and then turned onto a side street that I hadn't noticed before. Stopping at a small house, he quickly got out of the car and went inside. I stood aside, watching the house. My breathing quickened as I imagined the worst. It seemed like hours before the door opened again and I saw him. But he was not alone. The woman he went out with was holding his hand. They exchanged a look full of tenderness, and he kissed her as he had once kissed me. At that moment, my world came crashing down. My legs buckled, and I could barely stay in place. It was the moment I was so afraid of, but which I could not avoid. Tears flowed uncontrollably down her cheeks. I felt how all my fears and suspicions became reality. Tom betrayed me. This was not a fiction. It was a cruel, unbearable truth. I watched as they got into the car and drove off, leaving me alone with my pain. I didn't know where they were going, and frankly, I didn't care. The only thing I was interested in now was how I could live on, knowing that he had betrayed me. Returning home, I felt the cold penetrating deep into my soul. Everything between us now seemed empty and fake. Our shared memories, our promises, all of it disappeared in an instant, leaving only the bitter aftertaste of broken dreams. Tom came home late, as usual. I watched him as he entered the house and saw how he tried not to wake me. This moment burned me even more from the inside. How could he be so calm after what he had done? How could he look me in the eye and lie? I lay down in bed, turned away from him, and felt him also lie down next to me. But this time, I couldn't hold back the tears. They flowed by themselves, and I felt the heaviness in my chest become unbearable. I could no longer hide the pain that was tearing me apart. That night was the first of many sleepless nights as I tried to figure out how we could have gotten to this point. But the answer never came. She got lost somewhere between lies and betrayal. The next morning, I woke up feeling empty. Tom had already left, leaving me alone in our now too large and quiet bedroom. I lay staring at the ceiling, trying to force myself to get up and go on with my life, but every movement was difficult. I remembered his hands, which only yesterday had embraced me tenderly, but now they belonged to another. From this thought, the heart again contracted with pain. I went to the mirror, looking at my reflection. It seemed that I changed overnight. His eyes were red from tears. His hair fell haphazardly on his shoulders. I barely recognized myself. In front of me was not the same Alice that I was before. Now this was a woman whose world had been shattered. I picked up the phone and dialed my friend's number, Kate. We've been friends since high school, and she's always been someone I could turn to for support. Kate answered almost immediately. "Alice, what's wrong? You sound like something has happened." Her voice was full of concern. I took a deep breath and told her everything. How I followed Tom, how I saw him with another woman. The words came hard. Each of them felt like a blade penetrating deeper into the wound. But I had to say it. I had to share my pain. Kate listened in silence without interrupting me, and when I finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. "Alice, I'm so sorry," she finally said. "I can't believe Tom did this to you. It's just unbelievably cruel. What should I do now?" I asked, feeling tears coming to my eyes again. I don't know how to live on. "You're not alone, Alice. We'll get through this together. But you have to make a decision. You can't stay in this situation knowing he's cheating on you. You have to decide if you can forgive him or if it's time to move on." Her words were logical, but my mind could not grasp the whole situation. I felt stuck in a trap, not knowing which path to choose. How can you forgive such betrayal? How can you trust a person who destroyed everything that was between us? After talking with Kate, I decided I couldn't stay in the dark any longer. I had to talk to Tom, learn the truth from his mouth, even if it would hurt. And this evening I decided that I would do it. When he returned home, I was already waiting for him in the living room. He saw me and froze for a moment, as if he felt that something was wrong. But then, as if nothing had happened, he approached me, smiled, and kissed me on the cheek. His touch, once so warm and comforting, now caused me nothing but revulsion. "We need to talk, Tom," I said, trying to control my voice. "About what?" He looked surprised, but in his eyes I saw something more. Some shadow that flashed for a moment and disappeared. "About where you were yesterday?" My voice trembled, and I could barely hold myself back from crying right in front of him. He was silent, looking at me as if trying to decide what to say. Finally, he sighed and turned away from me, looking somewhere in the distance. "Alice, I don't know how to tell you." His voice was low, almost a whisper. It was the worst. His silence screamed louder than any words. I knew I would hear more, but it didn't make it any easier. "Tom, tell me the truth. I saw you with her." These words jumped out of my mouth, and he shuddered as if from a blow. He finally turned to me, and in his eyes I saw what I feared the most: guilt. "Alice, I made a terrible mistake," he whispered, and I felt the ground giving way from under my feet. This truth, so terrible and painful, now stood between us, breaking what was once our love. Tom stood in front of me, his words seeming to hang in the air, mixing with the silence that suddenly filled the room. I could feel every cell in my body trying not to believe what was happening, rejecting reality like a nightmare. Terrible mistake? My words sounded louder than I expected. Their echoes bounced off the walls, reinforcing the sense of isolation. Tom, it wasn't just a mistake. You ruined everything we had. How could you? His face contorted in pain and remorse. Alice, I don't know what to say. It's not what I meant. I'm just confused. Confused? I felt my indignation rise, filling every corner of my soul. You got confused and decided to betray me? Is that your decision? Tom paced the room nervously, holding his head, as if trying to find words that could somehow justify his action. But the words did not come because there could not be any. Alice, I know it sounds silly, but it was a mistake. It meant nothing. I love you, and only you. His words should have calmed me down, but instead, they only infuriated me even more. Mean nothing? Do you think I'm a fool, Tom? How could what you did mean nothing? You chose her over me, you betrayed our trust. I felt tears come to my eyes again, but this time they were tears of anger and frustration. I couldn't hold back anymore. How long did it take? I finally asked, afraid to hear the answer, but knowing that I had to. Tom closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to collect his thoughts, and quietly replied, "A few months." Those words hit me harder than I could have imagined. "Several months," I whispered, feeling something break inside me. "You lied to me every day, every night. How could you do this to me?" He tried to approach me, but I stepped back, not allowing him to get closer. "Don't touch me, Tom. You've lost that right." He stopped, looking devastated. I saw that he was in pain, but this pain could not be compared to what I felt. He betrayed me, ruined our lives, and now we both had to pay for his actions. "I don't know what to do," he said, his voice shaking. "I don't want to lose you, Alice, but you've already lost me," I answered quietly but firmly. "You chose this path yourself, Tom, and now you have to live with the consequences." Silence reigned between us again. I could no longer look at him. His presence only increased my pain. Turning away, I left the room, leaving him standing there, ruined, like our relationship. I went up to the bedroom and closed the door behind me. Love and peace once reigned in this room, but now it has become a witness to our collapse. I collapsed onto the bed, letting the tears finally escape. They flowed incessantly, washing away all the remnants of hope and trust from me. All the dreams, plans for the future, everything we built together have now turned into ruins, and these ruins surrounded me, reminding me that I would never again be able to trust the person I once loved so much. Sleep did not come. I lay on the bed, staring into the darkness that was now my only companion. Night used to be a time of peace and rest, when I could snuggle up to Tom and feel his warmth. Now the place was cold and empty, just like my soul. I remembered our first meetings, those moments when everything was new and exciting, the way he looked at me, the way his smile could melt away any of my fears. We built our relationship on trust, on promises to always be there, to support each other in difficult times. But now I understood that those promises were empty words that easily scattered in the wind. Tom slept in the living room on the sofa, leaving me alone with my pain. It was his attempt to give me space, but in reality it only increased the feeling of alienation between us. We were two people who were once one, but now found ourselves on different shores, separated by a river of lies. I could no longer stay in this house, where every corner was a reminder of what we had lost. The next morning, before Tom woke up, I started packing. My hands shook as I packed my clothes into my suitcase, each item bringing back memories I tried to push away. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I knew I couldn't stay here any longer. When Tom woke up and saw what I was about to do, his face went pale. "Alice, what are you doing?" "I can't stay here any longer, Tom," I replied without looking at him. "This place is no longer my home." He tried to approach me, but I raised my hand, stopping him. "Please don't make this any harder than it already is. I have to go." "Where will you go?" His voice was full of despair, and I could see that he did not understand how it all fell apart so quickly. "I don't know," I answered honestly, "but I have to find a place where I can collect my thoughts, where I can find myself again." Tom stood still, as if trying to understand how this could happen. His eyes were full of pity, but that didn't matter now. All I saw in his eyes was the emptiness that remained after he betrayed me. "Alice, please give me a chance to make things right," he said, his voice shaking. "I know I made a terrible mistake, but I'm willing to do anything to fix it." "Tom," I answered, trying to hold back tears, "you broke my trust, and as much as I want to forgive you, I can't. It wasn't just a mistake, it was a betrayal that changed us both forever." I zipped up my suitcase and looked at him one last time. I don't know if we can ever find our way back, but I have to go now. I felt his gaze follow me as I walked to the door. It was the last thing I could bear, his silent despair superimposed on my own pain. But I knew I had to do it. I could not stay in this house, in which everything was a reminder of what once was and what we had lost. I left the house and got into the car. My hands were shaking as I held the steering wheel, but I knew this step was necessary. I must find a new path, a new beginning, even if this path will be full of pain and doubt. As I drove, tears rolled down my cheeks again. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't go back. Our dreams were shattered, and now I was left with only the wreckage that I had to pick up by myself. The car sped along the empty road, and my thoughts, like an open wound, pierced every memory, every word, every look. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing: away from Tom, away from home, away from the pain that was tearing me apart from the inside. The radio was playing quietly, but I could hardly hear the music. The sounds merged into one continuous line, as did my thoughts. The road in front of me was foggy, and I was driving on autopilot, not knowing where I would find refuge. When we got married, I was sure it was for life. We made plans, dreamed of children, of old age together. But now these dreams have turned into ashes. Tom destroyed everything we built, and now I didn't know if I could ever trust someone again the way I trusted him. I remembered the way he looked at me when we first met. His eyes were full of adoration, and I felt the only one in the world for him. He was my world, my friend, my love, and now it's all gone like a nightmare, leaving only a bitter aftertaste. Suddenly I realized that I had stopped on the side of the road. I did not remember how I pressed the brakes, but now I was sitting in the car, gasping for air, as if I had just got out of deep water. My hands were shaking, and I could feel my heart pounding wildly in my chest. I got out of the car to regain my senses. The air was cool, and that was a little comforting. I sat on the hood, looking at the empty road that stretched into the distance, a symbol of my future, unknown and lonely. Where should I go now? Where to find a new beginning? I didn't know the answer to these questions, but I did know one thing. I couldn't go back. Returning to Tom would be a betrayal of myself, a betrayal of what I felt. My heart ached, but I knew I had to find the strength to move forward. I didn't know how, but I knew I had to try. I had no choice but to find a way to live on, even if it seemed impossible. I got back into the car and continued driving. The road was long and lonely, but I knew that somewhere ahead, maybe a new path was waiting for me. Maybe in time I can find the strength to forgive myself, not Tom, for letting him hurt me so badly. Maybe this is just the beginning of my road to nowhere, but I was ready for this road. I was ready for everything that lay ahead, even if it would be difficult and painful. I drove forward until the road swallowed me completely, and the world around me began to change. Perhaps it was a sign that change is coming, even if it seems painful and unpredictable. The night caught me by surprise. Dusk spread over the sky, and the road became even more gloomy. The headlights of the car cut through the darkness, but I could feel the burden of loneliness growing heavier with each passing minute. I knew I needed to find a place to stay for the night, but I had no idea where it might be. My heart sank with fear of the future. I realized that I had lost not only my husband, but also a part of myself. The one who believes in a happy future, in love that overcomes all difficulties. Now, all I was left with was pain that didn't seem to let go for a moment. The road led me to a small town where I hoped I could find a hotel or motel to stay the night. The signs with the names of the establishments glowed with a dim neon light, giving the impression that the city was stuck in time, somewhere between the past and the present. It was a place that didn't offer much hope, but I was ready to do anything just to find temporary shelter. I saw a small motel on the outskirts of town. After stopping, I dared to get out of the car and go to the registration desk. I was answered by an elderly man with a friendly but tired expression on his face. He asked me how long I was staying, and I said I didn't know yet. After receiving the keys to the room, I climbed the wooden stairs to the second floor. The room was simple, even too simple. A bed, a table, a chair, and a small mirror on the wall. But it was exactly what I needed now, a place where you can hide from the world and your thoughts. I collapsed onto the bed, feeling exhaustion finally taking over. The tears I'd been trying to hold back throughout the day began to flow again. I hugged the pillow like a child, looking for at least a drop of comfort in it. Here, in this small room, I allowed myself to be weak. I didn't try to hold back my emotions anymore. I didn't try to seem strong. The pain I felt was unbearable, but I knew that only by surviving it would I be able to find myself again. I thought about Tom, about what we had been through together, about how he had betrayed my trust. I tried to understand how it all happened, but no answers came. Only the bitter realization that nothing will ever be the same again. The room was filled with silence that seemed to speak to me, whispering words of comfort and consolation. In this loneliness, I found at least a little peace. Here, away from everything that reminded me of Tom, I could focus on myself, on my feelings and experiences. I knew that this path would not be easy. I knew that I would have to go through many trials before I could say that I had found myself again, but I was ready for it. I knew I had no choice but to move forward. After all, it was here in this small room that I felt the first glimmers of hope. It might still be fixable. Maybe I can find a way to live on even after everything that's happened. The next morning was gloomy and rainy. Raindrops were pattering on the windowsill, creating a melancholic rhythm that perfectly suited my mood. I woke up, but did not feel any relief from sleep. My thoughts were still engrossed in what had happened, and the pain would not let me go. I got out of bed and went to the window. The city looked even more desolate and lonely in the rain, as if every building in it was an echo of my own condition. I felt trapped in this small town where time stood still and the future was only a vague shadow. I decided to go down to the cafe on the first floor of the motel. I needed to eat something, even if I wasn't hungry. The cafe was almost empty, with only a few locals sitting at tables, slowly sipping coffee and discussing the weather. Their conversations were quiet, almost whispers, and I felt an even greater loneliness enveloping me. I ordered coffee and toast, but the taste of the food was barely perceptible. All my thoughts were focused on the past, on those moments that now seemed distant and unreal. I tried to remember when things started to go wrong. Were there signs I missed? Was there anything I could have done to avoid this? Suddenly, the door of the cafe opened, and I saw a man enter the room. He looked a little tired, his hair a little disheveled, and his clothes wet from the rain. He ordered a coffee and sat down at a table not far from me. I met his gaze for a moment, but quickly turned away, not wanting to meet someone else's eyes. I was sitting staring into my cup of coffee when I felt someone approach. Looking up, I saw the same man who was now standing by my table. "Excuse me, do you mind if I join?" he asked with a slight smile, but there was something in his voice that hinted at his own internal struggle. I nodded, not knowing why I agreed. Maybe I just needed some distraction, even if it was a stranger in a small town. He sat down across from me and took his cup of coffee. We sat in silence, each busy with his own thoughts. I didn't know what to say, but I felt a strange comfort in his presence. It was like a little reminder that I was not alone in this world, even if it seemed empty to me. "My name is Mark," he said after a while. "Sorry for the surprise, but you looked like you wouldn't mind the company." "Alice," I answered quietly, smiling slightly. "No, it's fine. I really don't mind." Mark nodded and took a sip of coffee. His eyes were warm, but they reflected some sad story, which he was in no hurry to tell. I felt that he was here for a reason, that his path might be similar to mine. We sat in silence for a while longer, but the silence was strangely soothing. I wondered why he was here, what brought him to this small town. But I didn't want to ask because I wasn't ready to tell my story myself. "Looks like we both have a lot to think about," he said at last, looking out the window through which the rain was pouring. "Maybe sometimes these moments of solitude are needed to find the answers." "I guess," I agreed. once again feeling the pain recede a little. His words made sense, and maybe that's what I needed, some time and solitude to find answers, even if I didn't yet know what answers I was looking for. The next few days passed like a blur. I stayed at the motel trying to figure out what to do next. Mark also did not leave the town, and we met several times in a cafe for morning coffee. Our conversations were short, mostly silent, but there was something soothing about them. His presence brought some relief, as if my wounds were beginning to heal a little. But I knew it was just an illusion. The pain of Tom's betrayal was too deep to go away so quickly. Every night was a struggle with memories that did not give rest. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and thought about our happy moments, about those days when I believed that we were together forever. But now these memories were like poison that was eating me from the inside. One evening, when the rain began to pour again like a bucket, I sat in my room and could not find peace. Suddenly, I decided to go for a walk, even though I knew it wasn't the best idea in this weather. Maybe I just wanted to feel something other than pain and despair, even if it was just cold rain. I went outside and walked without a clear goal. The rain drenched my face, mixing with the tears that I could no longer hold back. I walked the streets as if trying to escape from my thoughts, but they were with me every step of the way. Finally, I stopped at an old bridge spanning a small river. The water below was dark and swift, and I stared into it, trying to find answers. What now? What to do when your whole world is crumbling before your eyes? Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and saw Mark. He was standing there also, wet from the rain, looking at me with the same sad but warm look. "I saw you coming out," he said softly, stepping closer, "and decided you might need some company." I nodded slightly, not knowing what to say. His presence was unexpected, but at the same time I was grateful to him for it. Maybe he was the only person I could be honest with right now. We stood side by side on the bridge, looking at the river rushing below us. It was still raining, but it didn't matter now. The silence between us was not heavy, but it was filled with a sense of shared sadness that bound us. "You know, I'm not here for nothing either," said Mark after some time. His voice was soft, but I felt that something deep was hidden behind these words. I ran away from my past here, trying to find some peace, but so far it's not working out very well. I looked at him, feeling that we had more in common than I thought. Maybe his story could help me understand mine. "What happened?" I asked cautiously, not sure if he was ready to share. Mark took a deep breath and looked at me as if weighing his words. "I've lost someone too. Not like you maybe, but it hurts too. And I tried to run away from it, but now I know running away isn't an option." His words touched something in me, and I realized that he was right. You can't run away from pain. You have to go through it to find yourself again. And now what? I asked, looking into his eyes. "Now?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but I think we can try to find the answers together, if you don't mind." The offer was unexpected, but there was something hopeful about it. Maybe together we can find a way through this dark forest of pain and betrayal. Maybe we can help each other heal wounds that won't heal on their own. I wasn't sure what lay ahead, but I knew I didn't want to walk this path alone. And if Mark was ready to go with me, I was ready to accept his support. "I don't mind," I answered quietly, and for the first time in a long time, I felt that maybe everything would be okay. Mark and I headed back to the motel, and even though the rain continued to pour down, I felt my heart lighten a little. It was clear that we were both going through pain and loss, but now we had the opportunity to find solace in each other. Maybe our stories could intertwine and help us out of the darkness. We spent the next few days together, and our connection deepened. Mark told me about his past, which was complicated and full of losses. His wife died of an illness a few years ago, and he left his old life behind, trying to forget the loss by moving to this town. His pain was similar to mine, and it helped me realize that I wasn't the only one who felt this despair. We went for walks together, drank coffee. Sometimes we were just silent, but this silence was no longer difficult. I felt that I could breathe again, that I could find the strength to live on. Mark, in turn, began to believe again that life can bring new opportunities, even after deep losses. One evening, After we returned from a walk, Mark suggested that I go to a local park. He said that this park was a special place for him, where he could find peace and regain his strength. I agreed, hoping that this place would help me find inner peace as well. The park was cozy and green, even in spite of the rainy weather. We walked along a path covered in yellow leaves, and I felt my tension begin to ease. Mark showed me a small gazebo at the edge of the park, and we sat there enjoying the silence and beauty around us. "This place always calms me down," said Mark, looking at the river slowly flowing by. I nodded, feeling this silence and peace fill me. It was the first time I felt that I could calmly think about the future and not about the past. Maybe this place really had its own magic. "Is there anything you want to do when you decide you can start living again?" Mark asked, his voice soft and gentle. I thought about his question. Images that I had long forgotten began to appear in my head. Travels, new hobbies, attempts to find joy in the little things of life. I realized that somewhere deep inside I still didn't want to give up life and joy. "I think I want to feel again that life can be beautiful," I replied, with a smile that wasn't fake, but real. "I want to find new dreams, new goals, even if it may take some time." Mark smiled back and his eyes lit up with warmth. "It's a good start. And maybe we can find these new dreams together." We sat in the gazebo watching the rain continue to fall and felt that despite the past, there was an opportunity for a new beginning. Although the painful memories of betrayal and loss did not disappear, I felt that I would be able to find the strength and confidence to continue living. Mark and I decided that we would stay in this town for a while longer, allow ourselves to find a new rhythm of life and build new connections. It was only the first step to recovery, but I knew that with Mark I was not alone, and that was already a great achievement. Time may not be able to erase all the wounds, but I felt that there was hope. There was a chance for a new beginning, and it was worth moving forward. We spent several weeks in the town, and although our hearts were still wounded, we found new meaning in each day. My connection with Mark grew, and I began to feel that there was a new hope somewhere. We spent time together exploring the neighborhood, sharing our thoughts and plans for the future. It was like a breath of fresh air in my life, which was full of pain and disappointment. One morning, Mark suggested that we take a short trip to a nearby town. I agreed, hoping that new experiences would help us to distract ourselves and find new perspectives. We hit the road in Mark's old van, enjoying nature and the change of scenery. The road was picturesque, surrounded by forests and fields that changed with each kilometer. We listened to the music playing on the radio and talked about anything that came to mind. All our conversations were about what we would like to do in the future, what dreams we have, and how we can help each other realize them. When we got to the town, we were amazed by its atmosphere. Small streets, old buildings, and cozy cafes created a feeling of peace and comfort. We walked through the streets, looked into small shops, and even visited the local market. It was a nice break from our usual life, and I felt the tension gradually disappear. In one of the shops, we found old books and maps that captured our imagination. Mark bought some books on the history of the region, and I found an old map that showed local sites and places of interest. We decided that this could be the beginning of a new adventure, the study of local legends and stories. In the evening, we sat down in a cozy coffee shop, which looked like something from a fairy tale. The warm light of the lamps, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, and pleasant music created an ideal atmosphere for relaxation. We sat by the window watching the sunset and discussed what we planned to do next. "This place is really magical," I said, noting how relaxed I felt next to Mark. "Yes," he agreed. "I love how everything here is so simple and real. It reminds me that sometimes the best way to find peace is in the little things." I looked at him and noticed that his eyes were shining from the warm light of the lamps. It was obvious that he began to feel recovery, and this brought me joy. We were both still far from fully healed, but each day was a step forward. "Maybe we could try visiting these places from the map?" I asked, pointing to the map in front of us. "Maybe it will be interesting." "Sounds like a plan," Mark replied with a smile. "Maybe these journeys will help us understand more about ourselves and what is really important." We paid for the coffee and left the cafe, ready for new adventures. Although our hearts were not yet fully healed, We found support in each other and in our shared desire to explore the world. A sense of hope and possibilities filled us, and we were ready to face new challenges together. Trips to the surrounding areas have become our new tradition. We began exploring ancient monuments, visiting abandoned buildings, ancient churches, and breathtaking natural landscapes. These trips gave us an opportunity to distract ourselves from our pain and focus on new experiences. One day, when we visited one of the most remote villages in the district, we came across a small, almost forgotten church. Its walls were covered with moss, and its doors creaked with age. But inside the church, there was some special magic. Ancient stained glass windows, cozy light from the windows that filtered through the dirty panes, and silence that was disturbed only by our steps. Mark and I explored the church, and I felt a respite from my daily worries. However, at the very end of the church, I noticed something strange. An ancient bell attached to the wall with an inscription carved on it. The inscription looked like an ancient riddle, and I couldn't help but be interested. "Mark, look at this," I said, pointing to the bell. "Perhaps it is part of some ancient superstition or legend." Mark walked over and examined the inscription. "I wonder what that might mean," he said. "Maybe it's part of the history of this place." We decided to try to solve this mystery. After taking a few photos, we drove back to the town and asked the local residents for help. It turned out that the church was part of an ancient community, and the inscription on the bell was part of a local legend about a missing monk. According to legend, this monk once guarded a secret treasure that was lost many years ago. The inscription on the bell was part of a map leading to a place where the treasure could be hidden. We decided to try to find this treasure. Although we had no illusions that this could be anything more than just an ancient legend, we were fascinated by the idea of exploration and new adventures. Our next days were filled with searching and research. We went through old records and talked to local people, trying to put all the pieces of the puzzle together. And although many things turned out to be unsuccessful, each new piece of information gave us inspiration and a common goal. However, as we got deeper into the story, I noticed that Mark started to become more and more distant. He often sat alone, thinking about something of his own. I felt that his past was still weighing on him, and it was evident when he stumbled upon an old photo of his wife while investigating. "I don't know what to do," Mark admitted one evening as we sat in our motel. "I still feel like I can't leave her in the past. She will always be a part of me." I took his hand in mine, trying to support him. "I understand it's hard. We all have our shadows from the past. But that doesn't mean we can't move forward. We have to find a way to accept what was and find a way to a new life." Mark looked at me and smiled sadly. "You're right. I have to find a way to deal with this and move on. Maybe that's what I'm looking for, a way to resolve my own questions." We decided to take a break from the treasure hunt and devote time to personal reflection and healing. I realized that it was important for both of us to understand how to heal our hearts before we could fully commit to new possibilities. Despite the difficulties, I felt that we were getting closer. Our shared past has helped us find a new path, and although we haven't found all the answers yet, we've learned to appreciate moments of shared life and support, and perhaps that was the true value of our trip. After we took a break from the treasure hunt, our days in the town became less busy, but no less meaningful. We refocused on finding joy in the simple things and supporting each other during this difficult time. Mark began to open up to me more about his feelings, and I felt that our connection became deeper. One evening, sitting by the fire in our motel, Mark told me about his dreams and hopes. He admitted that he always wanted to be an artist, but his life turned out differently. After the death of his wife and the events that happened, he began to forget about his real dreams. "I always thought it was too late, but maybe I can still try," Mark said, his voice filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "You never know until you try," I replied. "Sometimes it's new beginnings that can give us the most satisfaction. I dream about many things too, and maybe this is the right time to start acting." Mark looked at me gratefully. "Maybe you're right. Maybe we both need to try new things and find ways to make our lives more meaningful." We decided that we should give each other the opportunity to try new things. This did not mean that we had forgotten our past difficulties, but we were ready to move forward and find new meaning in life. I started participating in local photography workshops and courses. It was something new for me, and I enjoyed every moment, admiring the beauty of the world around me. My photos became a reflection of my inner growth and new experiences. Mark also began attending an art school nearby. He met other artists, worked on his paintings, and renewed his skills. I saw how he comes to life, how his eyes light up again from the creative process. It was amazing to see how his life was filled with new colors and possibilities. We both began to enjoy our new hobbies and support each other along the way. These new interests became a way for us to express our emotions and find a new meaning in life. However, as we delved into new endeavors, the past never left us. Unforeseen memories and painful moments sometimes came back, reminding us of what we had left behind. But we learned to cope with it together, finding strength in our support for each other. One day, after Mark finished one of his paintings, he invited me to a small exhibition at a local gallery. I was amazed by his works. Each painting reflected his journey through pain and recovery. The sensations of colors and shapes conveyed what he had experienced, and I felt proud of how he was able to turn his hardships into art. "That's your achievement," I said, hugging him. "I'm so proud of you." "It's because of you," Mark replied, his voice filled with gratitude. "You helped me find my way back to my dreams." We stood in the gallery, looking at the paintings and trying to make sense of everything we had experienced and achieved. Our hearts were not completely healed yet, but we understood that we have each other and that we can build a new life, even if it will not be so easy. Maybe our past will always be a part of us, but we have learned to accept it and move forward. And although our journey is far from over, we have found a new purpose and new hopes that have helped us feel the joy and meaning of life again. Our new life in the town was developing, and we began to feel that we had found a new balance. But as often happens, when one issue is resolved, another arises. My and Mark's new zest for life and new endeavors became the basis of our daily existence, but the old questions and anxieties still remained. One morning, when I woke up earlier than Mark, I decided to go for a walk to start the day outdoors. The town was still asleep, and I enjoyed the peace, walking through familiar streets and parks. However, this morning something was different. I felt something heavy and disturbing in the air. When I got home, I noticed that Mark looked nervous. His usual smile was replaced by a serious expression, and his behavior was unpredictable. "What happened?" I asked, sitting next to him. "I got a letter," Mark said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. It was addressed to me, but without a return address. The letter said I should stop looking if I didn't want more trouble. My heart raced. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," answered Mark. "This letter sounds like someone knows more about our quest and wants to stop us." We discussed possible options for action. Mark didn't want to just ignore the letter, but he also didn't know if he should continue his search. I supported his decision that we should be careful, but also not give up without a fight. Over the next few days, we noted some unusual things. It seems that we began to be followed. Unknown people who appeared on the horizon from time to time, and small things that disappeared from our house. It was disturbing, and we decided we needed to find out more about what was going on. Mark went into the city to collect information about possible threats and learn more about who might be behind the anonymous letters. I stayed at home, keeping an eye on everything that was going on around me and trying to keep in touch with Mark. After several days of investigation, Mark returned with disturbing news. It turns out that someone may know about my past and is using it to keep us under control, he said. There is a possibility that it has to do with old affairs or people I was involved with. We decided we needed to contact the local police to find out more and ensure our safety. However, even with the support of the law enforcement officers, we could not feel completely safe. Someone else continued to play with our emotions and try to interfere in our lives. One evening, as we sat together discussing our next steps, I noticed that Mark had become more withdrawn and nervous. His fears and worries began to affect our life together, and it became a difficult test for our relationship. "I can't go on living like this," Mark admitted. "These situations are starting to feel like a repeat of the past, and I'm afraid it could ruin our lives again." I understood his fears and anxieties, but I also knew that we needed to stay strong and not let our fears destroy what we had built together. We continued to work on our recovery, trying to cope with new challenges. Our lives have been filled with anxiety and uncertainty, but we have not stopped fighting for our future. It was difficult, but we knew that only together we could overcome all difficulties and find a way to peace and happiness. The situation has become even more complicated. Every day brought new worries and unpredictable situations. Meanwhile, Mark and I tried to find a way to maintain normality in our lives, but the shadow of an unknown enemy and past problems continued to hang over us. Mark continued to work on his paintings, and I tried to distract myself with photography. However, these classes no longer gave such satisfaction as before. We were both immersed in our fears and insecurities. One day I received a call from a stranger. The voice on the phone was calm and cold. "You must stop your investigations," he said. "Otherwise, you may cause yourself irreparable harm." I started to panic and shared this with Mark. We decided that we should go to the police and see if there was a real threat. However, despite the efforts of the law enforcement officers, we did not get concrete results. At this time, I decided to visit an old friend who worked as a detective. His experience and knowledge could be useful in investigating our situation. We met in his office and I told him about our problems. "It could be related to what happened in the past," he said. "Perhaps someone you knew before is now trying to control you." We discussed the possible options and came to the conclusion that we need to be ready for anything. My friend advised us to be careful and not trust anyone until we find out who is behind these threats. When I returned home, I noticed that Mark had become even more withdrawn and anxious. His paintings no longer brought him joy, and he often spent his nights sitting alone, pondering something of his own. His behavior made me feel insecure, and I realized that our life together had become even more difficult. One evening, when we were sitting together, I decided to have a frank talk with Mark. "Mark, I know it's hard, but we have to find a way to deal with this. If we stick together, we can overcome these difficulties." He looked at me with sadness in his eyes. "I don't know how to continue living. I'm haunted by fears and memories of the past. I can't cope with this alone." My soul was torn by his words. I took his hand and tried to instill hope in him. "We'll get through this together. We've been through a lot. Let this be another test well overcome." Mark nodded and tried to smile, though his smile looked strained. We decided that we will not give up and will fight for our happiness. After this conversation, we both felt that our mutual support and devotion to each other became even stronger. We began to focus more on the positive aspects of our lives and try to find moments of joy, even in the midst of difficulties. Our days were filled with new attempts to find peace and recovery. We started participating in local events again, hanging out with friends, and trying to find new interests that would help us feel alive again. Mark started painting again, but now his works were more introspective, reflecting his inner journey to healing. I continued to photograph, finding beauty in the world around me and using it as a way to express my own feelings. Despite all the difficulties, we realized that our love and support for each other became our main resource in this struggle. We knew that the road to peace and happiness could be long and thorny, but we were ready to walk it together. Perhaps we still have many challenges ahead of us, but now we were ready for them with more confidence and courage. Our journey was far from over, but we felt that if we stuck together, we would be able to handle all the challenges that lay ahead. Our life continued to be filled with new challenges and mysteries. The anxiety about anonymous threats didn't go away, but we tried to focus on the positive aspects of our lives. I decided we needed to go back to our detective friend and find out more about who might be behind these threats. After several conversations with the detective and his leads, we received new information that indicated that our problem may be related to people that Mark once knew. It was an important and disturbing moment. We decided to test these suspicions. One evening, as we sat in our room, I noticed that Mark looked even more worried than usual. He was once again going for a night walk around the city to check out some suspicious places. I decided to join him, trying to be supportive and not leave him alone in such a situation. We set out into the city and, armed only with flashlights and our observations, began checking out places that might be important to our investigation. Our hearts beat faster with each step, and anxiety mingled with excitement. Unexpectedly, we came across an old, forgotten building on the outskirts of the city. It was a place we hadn't noticed before, but it made us suspicious. We decided to check it out, even though it was very risky. The entrance was blocked, but we were able to find a small opening through which we were able to get inside. The building was filled with dust and spiders, but inside we found some boxes and documents that looked important. Mark started going through the documents and rediscovered some old records and papers that had something to do with his past. He pulled out a document from the drawer on which was written a list of names and contacts that could be connected to the people who threatened us. As we looked through the documents, we noticed a few names that were familiar to us. Among them was the name of Mark's former business partner, with whom he had a difficult relationship in the past. This name caused us a new wave of anxiety. Mark began to reminisce about those times and told me about the problems he had with this partner. This was a man who might have had a motive to hinder us and cause trouble. We decided to contact the police with new information and learn more about whether this partner could be related to our problems. The police started an investigation, and we hoped that new evidence would help uncover the real culprit. While the police worked on the case, we continued to live our lives, trying not to let our fears and anxieties affect us. We rebuilt our lives and our relationships, finding joy in the simple things and supporting each other. One day, during one of our walks around town, Mark received a call from a detective. It turned out that the police had found new evidence that confirmed that our suspect was indeed involved in our problems. It was an important discovery that gave us hope for a solution to the situation. Mark and I felt relief and renewed energy. We knew that there might be difficulties ahead, but now we had more confidence that our struggle was not in vain. Our efforts, joint support, and determination began to bear fruit. Our life remained difficult, but we felt that we had a new chance for recovery and new beginnings. We knew we had to go through a lot more, but now we were ready for it with more strength and determination. Once we learned of new evidence and confirmation that our suspect was indeed connected to our problems, life began to seem less stressful. Although there were still many unknowns and anxiety, we felt that we were finally getting closer to solving our situation. Mark and I decided not to leave any more details unattended. We began to scrutinize all the documents and records we found, hoping to find something that could help us learn more about what happened. One day I came across an old diary we had found in the building and decided to go through it carefully. The diary was written in a hand I recognized as Mark's. It turned out that these were records about his business partner and their conflicts, but one of the records mentioned a secret meeting and a hiding place that could be important to the solution. Mark read this recording and confirmed that it could be a key element in the investigation. We decided to find this hiding place and find out what it contains. This could be the last piece of the puzzle that will help us complete the investigation and stop the threats. We set off again on our night journey, armed only with lanterns and our notes. The hideout mentioned in the diary was located in an old industrial area left over from the past. When we found the place described in the notes, our hearts started beating faster again. We knew this place could be dangerous. After a few minutes of searching, we found the hiding place. Inside was an ancient box, inside which were documents that confirmed all our suspicions. These were records of illegal deals, threats, and schemes that Mark's former business partner used to keep him under control. Mark and I were amazed when we realized that these documents could be the evidence that could stop the threat once and for all. We quickly took pictures and wrote down all the important details and went to the police to hand over the evidence. After the documents were handed over, the police began to act actively. We have received confirmation that the investigation is moving forward and that our suspect may be arrested soon. Meanwhile, we continued to try to live as normal a life as possible. While we waited for the final results of the investigation, we began to spend more time together, finding peace in the simple joys and supporting each other. Mark continued to paint, but now his works were brighter and more positive, reflecting his inner recovery and new hope for a better future. I also found joy in my photography, using it as a way to express my feelings and emotions. Our lives were getting back to normal, and we felt like we could finally relax a little. We knew we still had a lot of work to do, but now, with new evidence and the support of law enforcement, we were confident that our fight for safety and peace was nearing completion. Mark and I both felt that our efforts and struggles were finally paying off. It was a difficult and disturbing journey, but we were willing to go through it all to rebuild our lives and find happiness again. We continued to wait for the results of the investigation, trying to live as calmly as possible. Our detective friend kept us updated, and we got word that our suspect, Mark's former business partner, had been detained and questioned. However, before that happened, we experienced another disturbing situation. One evening, when we returned home after a walk, we noticed that our apartment was a mess. Feelings of fear and anxiety returned again, and I was sure that someone had been in our house. Mark and I quickly checked all the rooms and found only a few small signs of an attempt to open our safe, but no serious damage. Apparently, our suspects were trying to find something that could threaten their position. We decided that it would be safest to leave the apartment under surveillance and spend a few nights with friends. This gave us the opportunity to rest a little and think about what to do next. After several days of waiting, we received positive news. The police have confirmed that they have found new evidence linking our suspect to illegal activities and threats. This confirmed that he was the main cause of all our difficulties. Mark and I were relieved and happy to learn that our enemy could no longer threaten us. It became a landmark moment when we could finally start thinking about a new life and new beginnings. Mark continued to work on his paintings, but now his works were filled with light and hope. He began to participate in local exhibitions and even received several orders for his works. His art became a symbol of his inner transformation and restoration. I also found new ways to express my feelings through photography. My work started to gain recognition locally, and I felt like I had finally found my place in this world. We decided to make a few changes in our lives. We moved to a new apartment which was calmer and more comfortable. This place became our new beginning, and we happily furnished it, filling it with love and positivity. Our life began to be filled with joy and peace again. We often spent time together, traveling and enjoying simple moments of happiness. It was a new chapter in our lives, in which we learned to appreciate every moment and be grateful for what we have. Several months have passed since our problems were solved. Our life has become more stable and joyful. Every day we felt that all difficulties and sufferings were left behind, and we could once again taste the taste of true happiness. Mark and I decided to celebrate our new life and new achievements. We organized a small party with friends and loved ones to share our joy and thank them for their support throughout this difficult period. At the party, we remembered all the difficulties we went through and thanked everyone who was with us. We discussed our new plans and dreams for the future. The last days were especially warm and joyful. Mark and I spent time together celebrating every moment and every success we achieved. We started plans for future trips and new projects that we wanted to implement together. One evening, sitting on the balcony of our new apartment, we looked at the starry sky and talked about our future. We were thankful that we were able to go through all the difficulties and keep our love and support for each other. "It's been a rough trip," Mark said, hugging me. "But I'm so glad we were able to get through it all together." I smiled and shook his hand. "We've been through a lot, but now we have a new beginning. We can start a new chapter in our lives and be happy." We sat in silence, enjoying the moment and feeling the peace and harmony. It was the end of one stage and the beginning of a new, brighter, and joyful future. Our life continued, filled with new opportunities and hopes. We knew that while there may still be challenges ahead, we would always have each other, and that was our greatest treasure.